Welcome back for another weekly discussion of the new One Piece chapter. But before we get into the chapter, I just gotta say that it is July 1st when this video is dropping, which means that it is One Piece month, aka my birthday month, and my birthday happens to be July 22nd, which is National One Piece Day. So if you love One Piece, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe because we're going to be doing a whole month's worth of One Piece content. I'm super excited about this, so let's just get right into the chapter. I can't wait anymore. So yeah, this is chapter 1153 titled The Birth of Loki, and we're starting off the chapter with another installment of Yamato's cover story. I'm not pronouncing the full name. With this one, we have Yamato meeting up with Okiku in the Ringo region. Okiku is now the daimyo, and it's cool. I'm really wondering where the story is going. Like, I love seeing Yamato on screen. I wish he would have Straw Hat, but so far it's just been a lot of meandering. I mean, we did get a little bit of stuff with, page 1 and Ulti, but, it's not really going too much. I'm really wanting to see how this ends and how it's going to connect to the main storyline. We might see Blackbeard. A lot of people were theorizing that Blackbeard's going to show up in Wano. Who knows? But yeah, let's just get right into the actual chapter. So we're continuing where we last left off, where King Harald was getting, so we were getting Loki's backstory, but then we got a backstory within a backstory about Harald. So to understand Loki's backstory, we first have to start off with Harald. And I thought this story was really sweet. Oda's artwork in this chapter is very, very good. I really do appreciate when he's in good health and he does take the breaks that he absolutely deserves. Doesn't matter if Oda said he wanted to take a 6-month break, I'd be totally fine with that, because he worked so hard. And after we've lost so many people, we lost Akira Toriyama, and we lost the writer Berserk Miura. It's just I can't imagine a world without the ending of One Piece and without Oda himself. So the artwork in this chapter is phenomenal. We do have a break next week too, so hopefully the artwork in the following chapter is going to be phenomenal. Well, because there was some Elbaf chapter where it was a little shaky. I was like, oh man, some of these chapters just look a little rough, and probably was the fatigue, man. So I'm just happy he's back at full power. But yeah, getting back into it, Harald's backstory begins, and we see him from when he was a little kid. Now, it's very interesting because a lot of people would probably be confused on, why there's so much jumping back and forth between Harald and Loki. I think a lot of people miss what the chapters and this arc in Elbaf is specifically trying to say, because we do have a whole new race of people, whole different dynamic. I think Harald's character is very interesting because one of the things One Piece tries to get across to us is like the nature of a person. There's no one in the world that is inherently bad. It's no one who is born bad. There's no one who is born evil, right? And the people that are truly bad are doing bad things. It's not, pirates sailing the seas looking for treasure. It's anyone who would oppress other people because they were born to certain circumstances, or anyone who would take away someone's freedom. So in Harald's early life, he was definitely living wrong because he felt himself superior for whatever reason, because he was stronger, because he was taller, because he had, amazing power. It really doesn't matter. All that matters is that he used that power not for personal gain, but to hurt other people and oppress other people. So why is that though? Because anyone could talk about what he did, but it's so much about why did King Harald do these things? Well, like I said, he was born stronger and he was born taller than most people, right? And he grew up royalty, so he basically had a silver spoon in his mouth from birth. And because of that, he sort of had like a jaded view on the people that he were literally bigger than. The people were literally smaller than him. And it makes sense, when you're royalty. I would like to chalk Harald's early life up to a kid with a magnifying glass. If you're an 8-year-old kid and you have a magnifying glass and you see a bunch of ants walking on the pavement, you're probably going to melt them. Now, is that right? Is it ethical? Definitely not. But it's also not super harmful to how the world functions as a whole. So Harald, with his giant self, most likely saw himself as the magnifying glass and the kid, and he saw everyone else as ants. Now, this is very similar because the celestial dragons, while they aren't giant in size, they live on top of the red line above everyone else, literally breathing different air through their bubbles than everyone else. I think we're getting to the point, especially now that we have all these gods knights appearing in the story, I think we're getting to the point where the argument of nature versus nurture is going to be very important, because when we had it, the first time we ever get like a big, like, discussion about this in One Piece is Corazon versus Doflamingo, right? And the sheer fact that these two had the same upbringing and the same, lifestyle and family and blood and all that, but they became two different people, shows that Oda is very insistent on showing us the themes of nature versus nurture. The fact that Doflamingo chose to be who he is when he could have been a different person if he had that type of love that Sengoku gave to Corazon, and that Corazon gave to Law, who was also a jaded and hateful person. I just wanted to point that out because there's another thing in this chapter, mostly towards the end, but you do see it a little bit in the beginning. A lot of people were talking about how Ida, Harujin's mother, and basically the king of Elbaf, I keep forgetting that, Harold's first wife, basically, essentially his first wife, even though it was never official. She's not conventionally attractive. I mean, me, I have a thing for, bigger, taller women. So I didn't think of it when I first saw it. I just saw me a sexy giantess who wasn't afraid to take charge, no matter how big you were. I'm a big guy myself, so if 5'2" Latina wanted to punch me in the face, I'm not saying no to that. But that's the way. I'm getting sidetracked, right? But they were saying how she wasn't conventionally attractive. Not saying she was ugly, it's just not Oda's typical style compared to Harold's second wife, Estrid, which we'll get into Estrid. While she's more typical Nami, Robin looking archetype. And I think something very interesting is that Oda's doing two things here. He's looking at the inside of a person rather than the outside, because if you look at the giants, right, they're big, they're hulking, they're massive, and a lot of them have like demonic features, but they're really kind-hearted people. And even our perspective from the beginning of Elbaf, we thought that, before we even got to Elbaf, we thought these people just loved war and they loved destruction. We thought this arc was going to be all about, the Straw Hats getting new weapons. And then we get there, and it's like, yeah, here's our library, here's our school. We don't really, like to do war. We like to drink and have fun, and we like to take care of the villages and stuff like that. So I think that this is where Oda is going to really start pushing the narrative about how it's about the nature of a person rather than their appearance, right? Rather than their circumstance. It's about how you treat people. So all of that is to say that as Harold goes on his journey, he's learning from Ida. He starts to be more compassionate. He starts to be a better person. He starts to not only, work with other people, but he shares their knowledge, because he realizes that, not only are we able to share information with them, but we're learning new things too. The way they build houses, the way they have their fabrics, and then we teach them how to navigate. I think all of those things are very integral to, especially because we're getting to the end of the story. The reason why is because Harold does try to go to as many nations as possible, but the world government gets in the way intentionally because they don't want a world to come together. They don't want a unified world in one piece. They want a world that's separated and fragmented and islands, because it's easier to control people. It's much easier to control individual island who has no connection to the outside world, very little, other than trading and exporting and stuff like that. It just, that's how the world government has been able to stay in power for 800 years, other than the giant sky laser and, potentially some sort of memory erasing, which I don't necessarily think there's any memory erasing, but, we just don't know at this point what the world's government's tricks are. The reason why I was so invested in this chapter is because I think a lot of people kind of missed this point. So moving nature versus nurture aside and moving a person's appearance aside, those things are important, right? But I think that the most important thing Oda's been trying to convey to us throughout the entire story of One Piece, and I feel like this chapter hits it like right on the head, is the discussion about fate, about what is destined, what is predetermined, what is like, meant to happen based off of birthright, circumstances, prophecy, all of that, right? We know that Luffy is essentially a child of prophecy. And we know that he has a legendary fruit that, even we see in Elbaf is, prophesied that Nika and, the end of the world, they shall never meet again, all that stuff. I think in this chapter, Oda is trying to like mix both of his themes to have one cohesive thought, which is, it's not about nature versus nurture, and it's not about fate. It's about the actions that we take. So Harold, from the beginning, was a jaded person who looked down on people, but because of the positive influence in his life, he became a better person, which no one even believed in him being capable of doing that, right? On top of that, his first child, Harojin, was not allowed to be a royal member of the family. They didn't include him in the royalty of the family. They looked at him as a bastard child. They had to keep him outside of the castle. And that would be something that, like, people would say, oh yeah, this child isn't worth anything because he isn't like preordained by our ancient lineage to be worthy of anything. Meanwhile, he wants, like, in the current timeline, he wants to be the king of the giants, and he most likely will be because he's going to put in the effort to do so because he's motivated to do so. And then at this point, we get introduced to Estrid. And what are the characteristics of Estrid? She's very superstitious. She's very, like, everything has to be with feng shui. Everything has to be, like, preordained by the gods, by the fate, by supernatural causes. And that ends up making her personality extremely sour, and she's an awful person, basically. And I can tell that the reason why she feels that she can be these ways where she can, like, take all the gold and she can discard her child is because she feels that, like, because fate is on her side, that she's automatically right, rather than looking right in front of her and seeing that these things are wrong because she's not doing, like, a morally correct thing. And I think that's what a lot of times what One Piece villains in general reflect, especially as we get higher up the the food ladder of the power scaling, where there are a lot of people CP9 is a perfect example of this. They're like, oh yeah, it's fine to kill as long as we're following the law. Where whatever the people who make the laws do, we can kill whoever we want. Same thing with Akainu, where he's like, yeah, it's fine to, like, absolutely destroy pirates and blow up islands of, innocent civilians as long as we feel like we're in the correct. It's the same thing here, where Estrid's like, yeah, it's okay to throw away my baby because they're fated to be a bad person. It's like, instead of trying to go about these things through destruction, right? These people, they're bad because they're oppressing others and they're not nurturing the future, which is what Elbaf has been trying to do. They're trying to nurture the new generation to, like, not be so focused on destruction. And this is like a very important chapter to me. I feel like this is going to be like one of those big chapters we look back on and we write a million video essays about, because I just feel that it's something that's super important to the story about what the themes are. It's like, it doesn't matter if Luffy is a child of destiny. I don't believe he is, and the reason why I don't believe that is because there's nothing influencing his personality. There's nothing in his head telling him you must be a good person. Luffy is a genuinely good person because he wants to be, and it doesn't mean he's perfect. He has his selfish ways, he has his stupid moments, but the fact that at his very core he treats everyone with respect and treats them all equal. Man, woman, child. We see the way he treated Vivi. We see the way he treated Momonosuke. We see the way he looks at other people, with, like, this, like, innate curiosity. You know, even to the point where like a blind man wish he could have looked at Luffy's face because of just how genuine of a person he is. And that's basically, you know, what I took away from this chapter. I you know, the fact that like Loki was just a baby and his mother was able to just discard him because of fate and bad omens. You know, there's very clearly a direct message that Oda is trying to tell us here, where it's like, it's not about the form of these things, it's about the nature. You know, it's yeah, but I'm stealing from God of War. Yep, you got me. I'm stealing from God of War Ragnarok. I'm keep writing right here. But it's like, yeah, Loki can look a certain way, but he's still a baby at the end of the day who was reaching out for his mother's like arms to, like, you know, feel her warmth, you know, and it's tragic that he never got to experience that. And he covers his eyes for the rest of his life to avoid that type of scrutiny. And we've seen many cases like that where, you know, there's plenty of people in the One Piece world who cover themselves up. So, like, you know, for example, you know, fishermen will cover themselves up, you know, then the branding of the Celestial Dragon mark and stuff like that. There's just so many examples in One Piece. And this right here is like, I feel like this chapter truly embodies everything Oda's been writing, and it's definitely very significant towards like the resolution of One Piece. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on the chapter. I you know, obviously I'm rambling. This was a big mess. But yeah, I just want to share my thoughts on how I feel the themes of this chapter went. If you like the video, please like, comment, subscribe. I really appreciate it. This is One Piece month. Hopefully I can hit 1,000 subscribers. Yeah, more One Piece videos coming non-stop. This is just, you know, hopefully we get a decent amount of chapters this month to hopefully get at least 3 more chapters this month. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. It's the Late Developers. I'll see you guys next time.
Everyone, I need you all to